Welcome to Like Mother, Like Murder. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather.
We bring you the good,
The badass.
and the crime.
This is Like Mother, Like Murder.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Like Mother, Like Murder.
Welcome back to another episode of your most favoritist podcast that you've already gone and left a 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Isn't there like a Google?
Google Pods, Coffee Pods, Earth Pods, wherever you listen to your pods. Google Pods.
No,
There probably
a
is.
thing.
I think you're thinking Good Pods is a thing, so that might
maybe
be
that's what I'm thinking of.
in your brain.
Yeah.
In your brain. Yeah, if you guys haven't done that, we definitely love the reviews. So Heather and I, we're actually working on a little it's like a collaborative video that we're doing right now, and it's going to be awesome, and it definitely has to do with reviews. I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to say too much. But just wait for it, okay? If you're not following our socials, you should be.
Let me say one thing. Are you ready?
Yes.
Frogs.
I knew it. I knew it was coming. Okay, who here, raise your hand so that I don't see you, thinks we sound like frogs? Ribbit. Yeah, one time we did just get a review on one of our YouTube video that just said the word frogs.
And now I'm wondering,
Thank you. I don't know.
Do you think that's the one where I talked about Beyond the Shadows and how I was dying laughing because they gave the news story about frogs?
You know what? If it is, that would make things even funnier, because then it's like we thought it was bad, but they're literally laughing with us. And
the frogs?
I'm not sure.
But there was zero context. It just said frogs.
They're like, we don't need to give you context. You know, because you created the context.
Maybe that's what it is.
So funny.
We're going to have to go back and check. Anyway, welcome back to another week, y'all.
Another week. Episode 128, if I'm correct. And I have no desire to go look if I'm correct or not.
Well, and we are officially in November. We hope you all had the most amazing Halloween. And now you're getting ready for that Thanksgiving turkey. Get your turkeys early. Remember to pull them out of the freezer, depending on the size, a few days early so they can defrost.
Don't blow up your houses if you try to deep fry a turkey.
Oh, yeah, definitely don't do that. And why don't we start today? I'm just going to say, since in podcast world it's November, I'm going to say something I'm grateful for.
Okay.
I am grateful for...
Thank you, I know.
I literally was going to say...
No, you weren't. Shut up.
I was going to say, last night, y'all, Rachel, myself, and our amazing friend Megan, who we all live in different states, California, Utah, and Kentucky, we, after much planning and rescheduling and last minute scramble to find pumpkins or not find a pumpkin.
Not find a pumpkin.
We finally had a virtual paint and sip where we got to hang out for a few hours online while we sip some wine and or whatever. What were you drinking last night?
Water. And
got to do some painting and get creative, but also just spend time. And I am grateful that technology is what it is these days, that we have the ability to do that, to just hang out in a way that, you know, otherwise we would not be able to without the advances of technology. So I am grateful for that. And I'm grateful for our many, many years of friendship.
Yes, that's beautiful. I love that. And did we stay on, did we do that for 3 hours?
Yeah.
I just did the math. I didn't realize that it was 3 hours
It
last
was
night.
over
It goes
3
by
hours.
quickly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it goes by quickly. I definitely had no idea it was 3 hours. I do know that I didn't get to bed until after 1:30. It was like
Yeah.
1:45. And I think that's why we came like running out the gates on this episode, because I am in a state of delulu and just have been on 100% high
Yeah.
all day.
So we
'cause
need
I
to
slept for
get
2
through this
hours.
episode before you like crash and burn.
I'm not allowed to crash and burn, actually. I don't have that.
Okay. Well, we'll do
Yeah.
the best we can.
If I ever like start to semi slowly lose my brakes where I could possibly crash, I just drink more coffee and then I'm
No.
fine.
I mean, you're all right there.
It's a cure all. Oh, I love that. You know what I'm grateful for right now
What's that? Coffee?
is, well, yes, actually. I was going to say, on top of everything that you just said, because I'm 100% grateful for that and for you guys in my life. I'm grateful for coffee and good friends, because the coffee that I'm actually drinking today comes from one of our good podcasting friends, Kevin, from Where the Weird Ones Are. And I am drinking, he has a coffee brand out right now, Weird Java, and he sent it to us.
Yeah,
and
he did.
I am drinking the dark roast right now. Delicious. But the reason I'm bringing this up as well is because no, not this Sunday, because it's the before, you know what I mean? So anyways,
Yeah.
Sunday, November 3rd is the first morning show with Kevin and David. They are doing a Weird Java in the morning show. And that is why we got this coffee, because you guys, Heather and I, are going to be on the morning show bringing a missing segment. And if you guys did not check out the episode that just went on Sunday, go check that out. It's on the YouTube channel, Where the Weird Ones Are. Go check it out, okay? You have to. That is an order.
Better listen, or we'll come find you and sick our frogs on you. Actually, Rachel's frogs, because I don't have frogs. But Rachel
I do.
does.
I have 2 frogs. Mm-hmm. I do. Do you know the names of my frogs?
It's not Thumbelina.
No, but that was one of my turtles.
That was a turtle.
I'm proud of you.
Okay.
That's actually the turtle I no longer have. We gave it to another. It didn't pass away. Okay. We gave it to another one of our friends, because
turtle enthusiast.
2 of our turtles were not really getting along and they were struggling. We could have got another tank, but Heather told me I'm not allowed to do anything more with my life. I'm blaming her in this moment.
She has a dozen animals. A dozen.
I do.
You literally
She counted them last night.
Need any more animals?
No, my one frog is named Senor Evan. And then my other frog is just called Albino Frog. I don't know if that's bad. It never got a name, but it's an albino dwarf frog, and that's just the name that it's just always been called. So
I love it.
That's the same.
I love
there
that.
It is. I think that's it. Like, we need to get into this. I'm so excited to sit back and listen to you tell a story today. And I definitely don't know this name, I don't think.
Yeah.
I definitely don't know, I don't think.
I wouldn't think you would, but I have a feeling, because I'm playing around with the title that I'm going to title this, like, when it actually gets released. But I didn't put that title here because I want to kind of not surprise you, Rachel, because there's a really good chance that you'll know where I'm going, because you know me and you know how I roll with these cases. But I am excited to talk about this. I will put a little tease. I have mentioned before doing something like this. So, all right, if that helps you. Before we get into it, though, I do want to say something. There is going to be a little listener discretion in this. This case does discuss suicide. So I want to make sure that you guys are taking care of yourselves. And if this is not the episode for you, I'm not getting into any crazy gruesome details, but it is a large part of the case. So I just want to make that out there, because you know what? We're getting ready to round out another year. And Rachel was just mentioning this, not fuck a New Year's resolution, but start now. take care of your mental health.
Yeah.
So, just want to put that out there.
988, you guys. 988 is the suicide prevention hotline. So if you guys need that, have that in the back of your mind all the time for you, for a friend, for your family, for whoever. And then also, my inbox is open as well. Always. If you ever need to talk.
And we'll be sure we're putting sources in the show notes for any resources that may help.
Yeah, we love you and you should be here. Mm-hmm. Okay, I am ready.
All right.
I am ready.
Let's do this. In 1992, Beverly Monroe was living in Virginia. She was 54 with 3 adult children, a daughter who had just finished law school, another daughter, and a son who were both in college. She held a master's degree in chemistry. Shout out, science gals.
Boop, boop.
And she had a great career. She had her own home. And in her own words, quote, "I had a great life, absolutely great life," end quote. Technically, Beverly was a single mother, but she did have a long-term boyfriend. And I am going to do my best to pronounce his name. Roger Zygmunt de la Brood. Fancy name for a fancy guy.
Yes. You killed that.
They'd been together over a decade. Roger was 60 years old and lived on Windsor Farm, which is like this fancy-ass properties in rural Virginia. And he was a little high profile. He was an art collector. He lived, like I said, on this fancy property. He was rich. He did have a bit of a history as a ladies' man, but he'd been with Beverly for a long time. On the night of March 4th, 1992, Beverly had been at Roger's house. She left to head back to her home around 9:30. She tried to call when she had arrived home to let him know she had gotten home safe, but when she did try to call, the line was busy. On March 5th of 1992, Beverly went over to Roger's house in the morning where she was met with horrible news. Roger was dead. A single gunshot wound to the head had ended his life. He was discovered in the library of his home with a gun, his own, that was on the floor. Roger had been found earlier that day by it was either like a farm manager or a groundskeeper for the property. Initially, the case was believed to be a suicide. The medical examiner had promptly ruled it so, stating the time of death as 10:35 the night before.
Okay.
But this theory wouldn't hold for long. One detective believed that Roger had been murdered. The prime suspect? Beverly.
Yeah, we love the different perspectives. We need those people that are going to look further and look deeper and try to...
Right. Don't close all the avenues.
Exactly.
We would want our loved ones to, in their passing, be sure that everything was done to ensure that everything's on the up and up. So this detective believed that Roger had been murdered, that the prime suspect was Beverly, and that the motive was jealousy. Apparently, Beverly had recently found out that her longtime boyfriend with his fancy mansion had been sleeping around, particularly with a younger woman, and that younger woman was currently pregnant with his child.
Ooh. You guys, don't do it.
Yeah.
Man.
And Roger was excited to have the baby.
Yeah.
So, just as is most cases like this, Beverly is a prime suspect. She's the significant other. So they question her. And we're not just talking about one afternoon, a couple hours of an interview. We're talking over days and weeks of detectives, particularly one detective, questioning Beverly over and over and over. So one particular instance, it was a few weeks after the death. It was at the end of March. And they call Beverly back to Roger's house, back to where the death occurred.
What year was this? I forgot already.
1992.
1992. Okay.
Yeah, so not like super recent, but DNA is a thing.
Right.
Right.
I'm trying to already think about everything.
Yeah, forensics are a thing. Yeah. So Beverly is called out to Roger's house for the detectives to question her again, and she was under the impression that the detectives were there to complete a suicide report. And it was throughout this day, the whole day, she said she was there for hours, detectives repeatedly suggested that she had blocked the memory of Roger's death. They talked about how Beverly was traumatized, especially because Beverly's own father had died in the same way.
Oh, wow. But same way as in the
committed
presumed like suicide that we were talking about, or possible murder in his office. Okay.
Beverly's father had committed suicide with a gun.
All right.
Yeah. So according to reports, Beverly would, quote unquote, confess that she might have been present at the victim's home at the time of death, and that perhaps she had blocked out the memory. Specifically, that she had remembered being at the home, at Roger's house, on the night he died, where she had fallen asleep opposite where he was resting on the sofa. And then she allegedly told the officer she remembered being suddenly awakened by a loud noise. And upon finding Roger dead on the sofa, she left the house in shock. Now, unfortunately, none of this confession, if you want to call it that, she's not admitting to killing him. She's just admitting to being at the home at the time of death. But none of this confession was recorded because the detective had apparently forgotten to turn the tape back on. So Beverly recalls that this was a grueling ordeal. And not only was she still trying to recover from the loss of Roger, but now it's bringing up all the memories of her father, which the detective did talk to her about. And Beverly recalled that her own mom had actually heard the gunshot during Bethany's father's suicide.
There's so many like things that are going on in my brain right now.
Like what?
Well, I'm like, I don't want to spoil things or say things, but I guess right now my thought is that she's absolutely guilty, and that the detectives are seeing this as like she witnessed this, she knew this happened with her dad, she tried to do the exact same thing and get away with it to him. I don't know. Yeah, okay. That's where my brain's at right now.
All right. Let's keep going, and then we'll check in with you in a little bit. We'll see how that thought is going.
Okay, now I don't think I'm right.
No,
not that I want to be right.
Actually had not thought about that theory specifically, which makes total sense. It's bringing Staircase vibes, where she's witnessed a death, or she's known about a death that occurred in this manner, and now like recreating that same scene. Yeah. So that is a very interesting. I had not thought about that before. Your brain.
I did. I thought about it.
You did.
Just now.
Yeah. So on June 3rd, so remember the death occurred at the beginning of March, this original kind of statement, confession, whatever you want to call it, happened at the end of March. On June 3rd, she's called again by the head detective. And this time, guns were blazing, knives were out.
On her end or on their end?
On their end. The detectives
metaphorically?
weren't effing around anymore.
Okay.
So they threatened one of the worst things you could ever threaten a mother with. They told Beverly she would not be able to see her children if she was convicted. He said that they could paint her as, quote, a black widow who killed Roger. And after 5 hours, the detective wrote out a, quote, hypothetical, end quote, statement, which I don't understand how it could be a hypothetical state. I don't know what that is. I've never heard of that before, but it was a hypothetical statement detailing the previous story that Beverly was there, that she'd fallen asleep on the couch at the time of Roger's death. And he gave it to her, and pretty much she signed it, threatening that if she didn't sign that statement, he'd arrest her right there on the spot.
Okay.
So after this statement was signed, Beverly Monroe was subsequently arrested, not like the same day, but she was arrested for the murder of Roger Zygmunt de la Bird.
All right.
So let's talk about, so that was the investigation. Let's talk about the trial. So during the trial, the prosecution brought in experts that testified there was no way that Roger had shot himself based on the position of the gun. And also that when the handgun was fired, the muzzle of the gun was near but not touching the forehead, and that the bullet had actually traveled at a downward trajectory, which they said is not common, is not indicative of a self-inflicted shot.
But, and this is totally just me being, fuck our words. What's the word when you're like, not guessing, like, huh?
Frogs?
Frogs. Frogs. Not an assumption, maybe?
Okay.
I don't know. Anyways, the point I'm trying to get to is that if it's at a downward, I'm assuming, I guess, that he is taller than she is. Was he sitting at his desk and she shot downward on him?
You are such
Was someone else there?
you just like, you're in my brain, because according to evidence of his usual sleeping position, Roger's body was in the position as though he was sleeping when he died.
In his office? You said in his office, though,
He was
right?
he was on like a couch in his library. He's rich.
A library.
He's in a mansion.
Okay.
He's in a library. Yeah. It's got couches.
Well, as you can tell, I don't know. I've never read a book. I can't even think of the word assumption. Okay? I don't have a library here.
So, the prosecution also presented evidence from a witness who claimed that Beverly had contacted her 10 months before the death to ask about getting an untraceable gun.
Ooh, that's not a good sign.
No. But apparently that informant had a previous criminal history and a history of working with the detective on the case as kind of an informant. And this woman had actually recently been extradited back to Virginia after having committed crimes out of state. So we know how we feel about that, but I'll talk about it a little more. So they had this forensic evidence related to the gunshot wound. They had this witness saying that Beverly had contacted her about purchasing a gun. And of course, this was all on top of the signed statement from Beverly. But remember, the signed statement was not like a signed confession of I killed Roger. It was just a signed statement saying that she had been at the house at the time of death.
Yes.
Which, of course, was inconsistent with her original statement where she said, no, I left. And it was only after talking to the police officer after the fact, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So Beverly had spent $200,000 on a defense attorney, which, remember, this is in the 90s. So that's like a decent chunk of I mean, it's a decent chunk of change these days, but
Right,
like,
right. Even more so then.
Even more so
times
then.
20.
Yeah. So the defense would hold to the theory that Roger had committed suicide. And Beverly would also argue that she had been manipulated during the questioning and that the statements were involuntary. They even filed a motion to suppress the statement because the investigator had moved on to the, quote, accusatory stage, and he was no longer in the investigatory stage. And so the statements were during a interrogation. It was no longer a question. It was a questioning. It was an interrogation. And because of that, she should have been read her Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent, blah, 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 blah.
Is there any possibility that you're about to mind blow me and the baby's mama is the one who's guilty? She showed up and then all of a sudden saw her sleeping on the couch and went up there?
I love the way your brain works. Seriously, though. I don't know about, you'll have to see. I like to think there's a mind blow in here, but we'll see.
Okay.
So, and here's the mind blow.
Oh gosh.
Beverly had receipts from a grocery store on the night of Roger's death showing that she was miles away at that time of death. And there was an eyewitness that remembers speaking to her on that night.
How long were her and Roger together?
Like 10 years. A long time.
So he knew about her dad and stuff like that too. So was he staging it to try to like make it look like it was her?
I don't know. That's a great, that you are just full of thoughts here. I
need to sleep 2 hours every night.
So we have the prosecution's evidence of the gun and the trajectories, and there's the prosecution, quote unquote, expert witnesses, who indicate that this was not indicative of a self-inflicted wound. We have a witness claiming that Beverly tried to buy a gun from her, but again, this is kind of jailhouse informant type, so know how we feel about that. And we have the statement from Beverly that she did sign, but which stated basically that she was just there at the time of death. Okay. Then we have Beverly stating that she was manipulated and forced into signing that statement. It was involuntary, and that she should have been read her Miranda rights if she was being interrogated and not just questioned. She has receipts from a grocery store on the night of his death, and there's an eyewitness saying that yes, she was there. And remember, her initial statement said, "I left," and it was only after these kind of hours long interrogations that she said, "Oh well, maybe." But of course, we don't have like tape of that, right? That's all the evidence on the table. And in this case, November 1992, Beverly Monroe was convicted of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 22 years in prison, which means that if she had served her whole sentence, she'd be like pretty much 75 years old when she was released.
Okay.
Now, I know I've done some short episodes in the past, but this would be a very short one for the books if this was the end of the story. But before I get into what's going to happen next, let's do a check-in, Rachel. So what is your current theory? Where's your head at?
First of all, I thought you were going to say that you were doing a two-parter and we'd get back to, and I was going to be like, that's false. You are going to record this right here, right now.
What if we did that?
Not.
No, I won't do that to you guys.
All right. Talk to you guys next week on another episode. So I guess the check-in would be, I just have too many thoughts that makes me think that I should just turn my brain off and have no thoughts. I feel like I go all over the place of like the what could be.
Sure.
I guess as of right now, with what you've given me, the grocery store is kind of like throwing me off because without that, I would say everything leads me to her. The fact that there is that exact same like scenario
In her,
from her
yeah,
past
for sure.
that could definitely be something she held on to. She definitely has motive if she, he's with this new girl and a baby on the way. So I feel like everything points to her. How is there any sort of footage that did she go to the grocery store, then go back and shoot him? I don't know. So I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, let's try to answer your question.
I don't think he did it himself.
Okay.
So
and what makes you think that?
My
like, what makes
thought.
you think he didn't do it himself?
If he was excited, and again, like I feel like I don't know enough, but like if he was excited to have this baby on the way
Sure.
and be with this new person,
Sure.
I just feel like people who, and don't get me wrong, I know people can be happy and be excited and then really be very low
Sure.
and do stuff like this. So I'm not trying to downplay that whatsoever. But I feel like with what you said, he had things to look forward to.
Yeah.
And people who usually have things to look forward to don't take their own lives.
So Beverly, remember, had a daughter who had just graduated law school. Catherine,
no, I forgot that.
AKA Kate.
I forgot about that one.
I'm reminding you. And she was a believer in her mom. And as luck, fate, whatever you believe in would have it, she had just graduated law school when all this was going on. So she quit her, I think she was like working as a law clerk or something at that time. She quit her job and spent the next 6 years searching for proof of her mother's innocence.
Ooh, I think I'm gonna like this girl.
Mm-hmm. So together, Beverly and Kate, they would work really hard for an appeal. Eventually, this mother-daughter team discovered that the prosecution had illegally withheld evidence in the case. Now, remember, for those of you who maybe don't know, the prosecution is legally required to share any and all evidence that they have with the defense. The defense, on the other hand, has no such requirement, okay? But the prosecution has to show all of the evidence that they have. They cannot withhold evidence. So here are the things that they illegally withheld.
Ooh.
That this witness, who had claimed that Beverly had tried to purchase a gun, was given a deal in exchange for the testimony. We know that this happens. This happens all the time, but you do have to disclose that to the jury.
Yeah.
They also found evidence that the gun that was used actually had been moved, and the groundskeeper, manager who had actually found Roger, had told police that he had actually moved the gun when he initially found the body. Now, his statements, I guess, go back and forth a bit, but at the end of the day, there was evidence that the gun had potentially been moved. And there was medical documentation discovered that concluded that the death was, in fact, a suicide. So we know that expert witnesses, quote unquote, expert witnesses, come to the stand for either the prosecution or defense, and they can have opposing views. And it really just comes down to, as a juror, whose evidence do you believe the most? But the prosecution did not provide the opposing views that this could have been a suicide and not a murder.
Okay, so now she gets a new trial.
Well,
Uh-oh.
There's one more, and the final pin in this appeal were notes that they
There's
found.
a suicide note?
No, not a suicide note. That would add a whole other layer. But this grueling hours-long interrogations that happened with the detective, where it was conveniently that Beverly's actual quote-unquote confession that she was there was not taped, because forgetting to turn on the tape. And then, but the detective was taking notes, right, on a
Okay.
notepad. Now, it's funny because when I went over this with Zach, he's like, what were on the notes? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't have that access to that information. But these notes from the interrogation did support Beverly's earlier argument that she had been manipulated and coerced by the detectives. So they did have to go through several appeal, processes. It did, these things aren't overnight. But eventually, in April of 2002, so we're talking
10 years later.
Yeah. A judge overturned Beverly's conviction.
Okay.
And this decision was again upheld in June of the next year when it was brought to a higher court. And because, you can appeal and keep going and going. Right. And it was at that point in June of 2002 that the prosecutors decided, okay, fine, we're not going to retry this case. The federal judge who reversed her conviction called the interrogations that led to her quote-unquote confession, if that's what you want to call it. And these were the judge's words, deceitful and manipulative.
Mm-hmm.
And said that the case was, quote, a monument to prosecutorial indiscretions and mishandling.
Okay.
So Beverly was subsequently released in 2003, where she was greeted by her children and a grandson, which she had never got the chance to hold before.
Oh.
And her family were, of course, very happy that now she was out. But Beverly talked about having to start over, and now in her 60s at that.
Right.
She talks about how difficult it was for her to find employment. No one wanted to hire her. She tried to tell the truth, like, I was wrongfully convicted, but of course, like, it's hard. And Beverly is quoted as saying, you lose everything that you had in a normal life. For me, it was house, job, career, income, separation from my family. You lose health insurance, life insurance, all the security that you had. But one thing that did a bright light that came out of it, other than the fact that she was exonerated, Beverly and her daughter, Kate, the lawyer, now fight for the cause. Yeah. After Beverly was freed, Kate moved to Utah to head the Rocky Mountain Innocence Project.
Okay.
And as for Beverly, she goes around and speaks to audiences about her experiences. And we know that women exonerees are more rare. And when Beverly talks, she talks about how she believed. She grew up in the South. She had trust in the police. She believed they were there to protect her. And she considered herself naive. Yeah. And she says, quote, I can now tell anybody in this country, including the prosecution and anyone else, it can happen to you. Regardless of your economic status, regardless of your education, regardless of your record, it can happen to you.
Wow.
So a few things I want to say is that, and so Beverly gave a talk that is actually available online, and I will obviously link it in the show notes. She does like a full like hour kind of talk. I think it was like at an Innocence Project kind of conference or something.
Yeah.
And she talked about how Roger, she said, of course, this was the 90s, you never know for sure. It's not like he was officially diagnosed, but she did talk about how he had like major ups and downs, and that she thinks maybe he had bipolar disorder.
Okay.
She talks about how, and I mentioned this, he was a ladies' man. He had a wife, and he was still seeing a lot of other women. So one article I read said that he did like kind of give up actually finally say, okay, like I won't be married anymore, when he started seeing Beverly. There was another thing I read that said that his ex-wife, when she heard the news, when she called to find out like what was going on, she mentioned, she goes, he was on pills. He was on antidepressants. And the other thing that Beverly mentions is she says, I knew about the other woman.
Okay.
What you have to consider, these are folks in their 50s and 60s. This isn't their first time in a relationship. She's got 3 grown kids. When she talks about him, she refers to him a lot as her friend, because they were friends, just platonic friends, for several years before they started a romantic relationship. She talks about how she knew about the other women. Now, whether or not she was truly okay with that, who knows?
Yeah.
Okay. But if she also, cared about him just as a person, and he was excited about potentially having a baby, there is that. So there are a lot of things that came to light, and I don't know if these came to light at trial, during the appeal, or maybe even afterwards. A lot of things Beverly said that happened was when she was going through this whole process, there were a lot of things that were hidden from her that detectives specifically, did not reveal, which is at the discretion of the detective, right? That's totally at the discretion of the detective, unless you're talking about Miranda rights. Obviously, you do need to make that known. But a lot of this, if it was known by prosecutors, should have come to light at the trial. And this is what she says when she recalls the day where the detective called her after she had supposedly made a statement. So several weeks later, he calls her to this random park. He keeps her there for hours, questioning her. This is when he's like, I can make you out to be a black widow. You're not going to be able to see your kids. Beverly says that this detective said all he had to do was pick up a phone, and by that afternoon, it'd be in all the papers. She said, I was a single mom with 3 kids in college. She was supporting that.
Right.
And she said, it's like someone holding a gun to you and saying you have to do it. You have no other way to go. What do you do? So I signed it. And that's what she said.
Damn.
So what are your thoughts now?
Well, my thoughts now are I definitely got very quiet for a little while, just based on the fact that I guess in my head, one of the things you said made me think that it was definitely not going to be suicide. So like I had that in my head where I was like already thinking of every other thing to be like, no, it's not going to be, that won't be the outcome. That won't be the outcome. So I was like trying to play every single other thing. But I'm really thankful that her daughter was on that path and was able to do what needed to be done to help her mom and get an innocent person out of prison, because she would still be there. And we see that all the time where so many people are still there. But yeah, that I definitely didn't see it going that way. So I feel like that was already like out of my brain as I was trying to like come up with things.
Right. And you guys know how I feel about these things. I've done several of these now. Wrongfully convicted, exonerated. This one's an interesting one, though, because there's like 0 DNA. It's got nothing to do with DNA. Most of the cases I go through where is it a did they, don't they? There's some kind of, other forensic DNA evidence a lot of times. And I'm going to say it again. I know I've said it before on previous episodes, but for me, I personally do not think she did it. Oh, I forgot to mention this. I should mention this. One thing she said in this talk, I was not able to find it anywhere else. And there's actually like a very scant amount of information about this. Apparently there's a book, and Beverly said this in the talk, is that the night March 4th, there was a witness who claimed that night they saw a car peel out of the driveway of his house.
Wow.
That night. And that he had also that night made a call to like a friend And the friend remembers it specifically because he's like, it felt off. Like he didn't feel right on that call. Okay. So this friend remembers that. So there's a lot of things. And the reason I want to say that is because I want to say these next two words, reasonable doubt.
Reasonable doubt.
So this is the thing. All what you have is that perhaps she was the last person to see him alive, which...
Right. Which in every single case and every single thing, there is a last person to see someone.
Every single time.
Right.
And yes, that is definitely someone you should be questioning, because regardless of whether they did it or not, even if they didn't do it, they'd have a better insight of like maybe where his head was at. Was he acting weird? So yeah, obviously she needed to be questioned. And I do appreciate a detective having an open mind. You know, we don't like, oh, it was an open shut case. No, did you follow every avenue? Like, we need to know the truth. Okay. But here's the thing. With the evidence they had against her, there wasn't a lot of it, first of all. Second of all, she has evidence that counteracts like their theory. She has receipts from the grocery store.
She has receipts.
She literally has receipts. What is the thing? Receipts.
I forget. We need Liam.
I know we need Liam. Exactly. He'd know. And my thing is, with all that, I feel like there is reasonable doubt in that the prosecution did not answer all of my questions, you know, in the case.
You're right.
And then on top of that, the misconduct
on the prosecution side
by the detective, withholding evidence, jailhouse informants, who we know how I feel about that, manipulative questioning, interrogation, coerced statements and confessions, if that's what you want to call it. That is all how I feel is, even if she did do it, which I don't think she did, she would have deserved another trial where they would have needed to put forth new evidence or the same evidence in a better way, and they would have need to redo it, because talk about fruit from the rotten tree or whatever. This trial, we have to believe that our justice system
is set up for a certain way.
Exactly. They operate under rules for the protection of all of us. And if they're going to break those rules, none of us are fucking safe. As is, I mean, this is not your typical Innocence Project, you know, client. She's white. She's well off. She's got a job. She has no criminal history. And yet this shit still happened.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about it. And I had mentioned before on the last one I did, where it was the case in Monterey, where this guy did have a criminal history, a violent one at that. He did get sent to jail. And, you know, there was a lot of jailhouse informants and all that stuff. But I talked about the fact that, like, I want to find one with, you know, my first thought was like, I wonder how many women, you know, which isn't as many. And this one just stands out amongst the masses of exonerated individuals, right? Because this is not who you would believe would get fucked by the system.
Well, and even in her statement, how she said, like, she's definitely not who you typically see. That's what you're saying right now. I also want to say, like, how it's hard because we like beg almost for people to do their jobs, to take the extra step, to do the things that need to be done, because too often we see steps missed or things that are messed up initially, and it fucks up everything. But you don't get to want something so bad that you make things up and paint a different picture and force people into signing papers and tell people that they need to, you know, pay off an informant. And, like, that's not it, guys. No. That's not it.
No, absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not. And when you hear her speak, if you guys want to, like I said, I'll link it. You can really hear in her voice, even though this has been years and years since it's, she got out over 20 years ago. You can hear her talk about just like the experience of it all. And we're talking about a woman who at least had resources. She had a daughter, luckily, who had gone through law school. Like, there are so many individuals who do not have those resources at their disposal, and they are less fortunate.
Waiting for someone to come to their rescue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's my case. I was gonna, and this is the reason I didn't put the whole title. I just put the name on our recording, because I think what I'm gonna title this is Black Widow or Wrongful Conviction, or maybe Wrongfully Convicted.
Yeah.
Beverly Monroe. So
it's been a while since we've actually, I feel like it's been a while since we've done a mom crime in this aspect. We've been focusing very heavily on missing and moms on the other side of the crime. And so it's been a while, and to know that she served that time. And another question I have real quick, maybe you have the answer, like on the death certificate, is it still like, is it determined that it was suicide, or is it undetermined as of right now?
That's a great question. I would need to go back and double check, but everything that I read,
suicide.
The initial report from the medical examiner said suicide.
Okay.
Right? And it was only after this particular detective got involved. And when I say particular, like, there was one dude who seemed to just he was the one that questioned her. He was the one, but he was the one that went to the lab. Oh, and check this. And it was hard because there's not a lot of information out there on this case. So a lot of this I did get from her talk. But she said that they had done a GSR test, because, again, we're talking the 90s here. This isn't like back in 40s. They did a GSR test that showed that Roger had gunpowder residue on his fingers, which would be indicative of him having pulled the trigger. But apparently it was only after the fact, after the detective got involved, where he was like, this is suspicious, that he went back and then started talking to more quote unquote experts, right? Which we all know, expert or no, you can be a hired gun in these situations.
Yeah.
That they started to say that actually, we know this was ruled a suicide initially, but this evidence and that evidence and this evidence says no.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That is wild. I love how you cover those and make me, first of all, like, I feel like you definitely do it on purpose to make my brain go.
I definitely do.
At a million miles per hour.
It's so funny. So this is what's so funny, and this is why I titled it what I titled it instead of using my whole title. And I was talking to Zach because I had him. Of course, you guys know, like, literally every case I run by Zach. And so I said, do you think that in the beginning of it, I'm impartial enough that, like, you wouldn't know one way or the other? And he goes, I mean, like, objectively, like, on paper, yes, but if they know who you are, Heather, they know where you're going with it. And I said, oh, okay, so maybe I won't title. And I was like, so maybe I shouldn't title for the listener's sake. Maybe I'll just leave it open.
No, I think the listeners, they always want to know. But one of the reasons I was asking about what was on the death certificate too is, yes, so Beverly and her family got justice after all of this, of like the change of sentencing and her coming out and living a free life now after that was taken from her. And that's so different. That's hard for her. But for him, for Roger's family, the fact that there's still no answers, and like, it makes me question, is it closed and there's no looking into anything, and the family just also is like, content isn't the right word, but like understanding of like, okay,
have the closure and believe that, yeah. So, I mean, the only thing that kind of sticks out in my brain, as you say that, is there was this eyewitness who supposedly saw a car haul ass out of the driveway that night. And I don't know what that's about. But also remember that this was a fancy ass property that had like farm managers and groundskeepers. Like there's a possibility that it was somebody else. And then the other thing that comes to mind is he was seeing women and apparently had impregnated a woman, and who knows how she feels. But I think about like the ex-wife who had been married to him for a while, asking about whether or not he was on antidepressants. And from what I gathered, people who truly knew him knew that he kind of went through these ups and downs. For the sake of, and you're right, there's another side of this to think of, for the sake of his family and those who loved him, I do hope that there is some closure in that realm, because we have seen it where someone gets exonerated, and whether or not you believe in their guilt or innocence, you're like, well, what the fuck? What about my mom? What about my sister? What about my son? What about my brother? Now there's no answer to his case. Good point, Rachel.
Good job, Heather.
Thanks.
I like when you bring these, because as there's obviously that hurt and that sad and that pain for him in his life and his struggles, if that's what it was.
Sure. Yeah.
It sucks for the family if it wasn't that and there's no answers, but it's a win in the book of Beverly.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Heather, my dear. My dear, thumbs up, baby. You're so cute. Thanks. You guys, she's so cute. All right. There we have it. In November, starting off with a wrongful conviction. You guys, I just want to remind you that we are going to be taking a 2-week break coming up. You will be hearing from some other people, but you will not be hearing from us. And that's because we want to make you miss us. Just kidding.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
It does.
No, we've got some things in the works. We are so this break is like hitting a lot of things in one. Where it's a busy time. We've got busyness. We've got some other projects that we want to make sure that we can dedicate time to, but we also, one of the biggest things that we want to prioritize during this break is a very special way to come back after the break.
So season three, guys, it's coming. It's coming, and that's all there is to say about it.
Yeah. We'll be doing, you guys will know when it will be shouted from the rooftops when we're making this.
I love to shout from the rooftops.
Yeah, this transition, and we're excited about it, but we want to make sure we do it right.
Yes. Agreed, 100%. All right, you guys have an amazing week. We're in Hollow Thanksmas. Go back and listen to that episode that we did with OG Ashley.
Yeah.
Talk to you guys next Tuesday.
Whoop, whoop.
Whoop, whoop. Okay, love you. Bye.
Okay, love you. Bye. Bye. I have a feeling that today's
Nothing's
gonna
funny.
be
I just had to laugh. Nothing's funny. I just start cracking up. Shit.
I already feel like I'm going to trip over my words. All right.
I'm going to be a good girl. Shouldn't we be better at this by now?
No.
I know.